Well, since I will talk about Belgrade and some urban transformation there, I think you should know basically the historical context, because Yugoslavia was never actually the part of Eastern Bloc, and in 1948 we were expelled from Soviet realm, and basically all these transformations started then. New Belgrade, which you are going to see in that movie soon, started, actually the construction of the site started after 1984. So basically it was the expression of the new state, which was not deliberated from the Soviet Union, but more the expression of the state which found its own way to develop. And basically this whole new city was intended to be a new administrative and governmental center of Yugoslavia. So basically Yugoslavia took the opportunity of the Cold War to build its own niche, in fact to become a country which was neutral and which was always balancing between East and West. But the interesting thing after 1948 was that through that professional exchange we were always oriented more towards West than towards East. So you can see the images of the central zone with the model of New Belgrade, and of course President Tito, who was observing the process. And here you can see, for example, some images. This is during the construction of some of the first blocks. This is the airport building, which is also in that area, in that part of Belgrade. And this is also for the first meeting of non-aligned countries in 1961. They constructed some of these first buildings were actually already built, and this is the fountain which was designed by Siemens. So it was kind of very with special effects for that time. And you can see the master plan from 1950, which can actually display the whole logic of New Belgrade, because in that moment the idea was to make a compact city. So this is the historical central part of Belgrade, and this is New Belgrade, and that is them. So New Belgrade was kind of connecting zone between two parts of already existing parts of Belgrade, and that was the idea of this plan, was to develop that whole, let's say, to fill it. And then you can see the image of the central zone. It is master plan for central zone of New Belgrade, and these are first blocks. These are blocks 1 and 2, and they're really designed according to these modernist principles. And you can see images nowadays. Those two are, I mean, I took those pictures like 2 weeks ago. So you can really see the greenery and all that space, how it was actually anticipated and realized. And these are a bit older blocks from 60s. And this is the first one which was realized in this central zone, that is the block. And it was planned to be one of those very, let's say, attractive housing blocks, because it was intended to be a place for high army officials. So basically the quality of housing was very high. And in general, New Belgrade was kind of focused for that kind of inhabitants, like military, army. These are not social houses like maybe in some other cities, but it's actually very high quality housing. And now you can see master plan from 1972, where idea actually was quite different. It's plan of expansion of the city. So New Belgrade was already materialized to a certain degree, but this plan actually followed some Western models, and I did some research related to the professional exchange during the Cold War, and it's quite interesting that our Town Planning Institute has a lot of connections with Western colleagues. And actually, while they were preparing this plan, they had a lot of visits to, I don't know, Copenhagen, to London, because the practice was important. Also, they had visits to Budapest because the size of the city and some elements were similar. So basically they used all these experiences and they kind of embedded it in this plan. And you can also see some examples of different architectural styles. So this is the Federal Executive Committee here. And these are some of the main buildings, actually. That is the tower which I mentioned, headquarters of the party, which is now the business tower. And this is the Museum of Contemporary Art, the White Building, which is also one of the very distinguished buildings in that part of Belgrade. And then you can see some blocks from the 70s, and one of tower which was actually built in 1980s. It's some kind of gate of Belgrade, we call it one of the gates, and it's kind of brutalist style. So basically you can see all those influences reflecting on the space of New Belgrade. And this is the latest master plan, which anticipates development until 2021. And basically this plan was a result of all these influences and turbulences which we had from the 1990s, and the idea was to somehow fix in some way problems which occurred in the meantime. So basically you can see these major flows which reflected in the space of New Belgrade and Belgrade, all these styles, and you can see the image of New Belgrade like at the beginning of construction and nowadays. Actually, maybe one curiosity would be fun. During the, I think, during the 50s, actually, yeah, then Yugoslav architects became actually active on the international scene, and when they wanted to be accepted in UIE, International Union of Architects, the country which was strongly against it was Poland. So basically the representative, I think her name was Helena Sirkus or something like that, and she caused a lot of trouble actually in Sijam as well, because she was like very social realism person, and she even wrote a letter, some kind of blackmail, that the Polish delegation will step out if Yugoslavia is accepted, and then actually the United States, their representatives, played a crucial role, and they made it happen. So then we were kind of accepted as members of International Union of Architects. So that's one of these curiosities. But that was already the period when Yugoslavia was out of the Eastern Bloc. So much of international cooperation with East and West.
Well, any questions about this fascinating in between? So, please.
May I ask what the influences are now on architecture? I mean, in terms of the city that New Belgrade would like to be, what is its aspiration? Formerly it had been modernism, and there were, you say, Western influences. Where is its aspiration lie now?
Well, I would say at the beginning of the 21st century, after all these political changes, we became quite open, which was kind of logical, to new experiences. So basically we embraced that model of globalization pattern, and we, as every other city, tried to kind of compensate everything we lost in the meantime. So Belgrade followed that recipe, globalization recipe, so, to establish some business nodes, some cultural regeneration, and you can also see in New Belgrade some attempts for that. And I think in 2007 or 8, I'm not really sure, we were also announced as a city or capital of the future for the southeastern Europe. And that was the previous city government. But now we have a new one, which has maybe slightly different vision of development. And they again, there were some ideas about these mega projects, especially along the river banks, because that's the area which is not it's not developed enough. It was always some kind of isolated area because of floods and all these things. and industrial facilities, and there were some ideas, but then they were stopped because of the crisis, of course, and this new city government wants to activate one of these sites. It's Sava Amphitheater, that's the name, which was usually exploited by every regime, you know. It was kind of, again, playground for them with these mega ideas of development, and so far we only have some kind of draft proposal for the development of that area, although it was elaborated through numerous competitions, studies, analysis, but now they have their own vision of development, and they also found investors from Saudi Arabia or something like that, where the money is. And it's interesting that actually currently there is no interaction, let's say, between professionals and the new city government. It's some kind of very unpleasant situation because, of course, professionals do not support that kind of mega activities which are not elaborated enough and which are kind of in conflict with all master plans, with all ideas, with procedures actually. But so far it's in some kind of, I don't know, in some kind of interregnum. We don't know what will happen. So that's the latest development, let's say. But when it comes to architectural styles, I would say that, I mean, it really depends. We follow, all younger architects follow these new trends, and the older architects who are maybe more in charge for development and new construction, they're kind of oriented to their own ideas. But
in terms of transportation infrastructure, there was mention made of a tram.
Yeah, light railway system.
The biggest impression is of major railway infrastructure getting in. Is that what's happening?
Well, that's one of course, projects for development. It's still not implemented. We, as maybe some of you know, we don't have metro system, so that's a problem for Belgrade. And this was one of proposals which was accepted because it should be cheaper than constructing the metro system. And again, it's on hold because, you know, now we have these different city governments, the previous one and this one, and I guess it's something which, again, has to be developed in the meantime. But that is one of the possible solutions, because now we have that new bridge, which was kind of condition for the development of that kind of transportation, and I mean, we still, I guess, lack resources for implementing that.
I'm curious about the new developments. So the promotion video showed, stated that one of the attractivities of the area is legally, available land. Is it former green space or public space, or were those areas?
No, this is for New Belgrade. So basically, you have a pattern which was, realized through these street metrics. So it is really without these legal burdens, which is not the case in the historical part, because there are a lot of sites which are kind of questionable. Even those the development sites which I mentioned along the riverbank, there are some tricky issues because you don't know who is the owner, like Port of Belgrade or maybe the city of Belgrade. So that is always the problem because it delays, every kind of implementation.
Does it mean that the original master plan is still followed?
In New Belgrade.
Zoning, or some green spaces are rezoned?
No, all these blocks were actually planned for housing and these additional activities, and some of them were not implemented. So basically now you have that empty space. Also blocks which were implemented. You have that modernist structure, but now you have these additional, for example, Mira Milakovic, my colleague and co-author in this article, she was dealing with these transformations of streets, modernist streets, into a new pattern. Because that is something which is going on in New Belgrade. Now you have that different logic which is applied. You have a lot of empty space, so basically now you have new buildings which are not in accordance with the original style of New Belgrade, but they're allowed, after all these interventions. So now you have basically different perception of space, which is not really in accordance with the original idea, but that's something which happened in time.